Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Great panel. And now to introduce our next speaker is the Vice President for Programs with the Leadership Institute, one of the great sponsors of this year's Values Voters Summit. Please welcome David Finner.
Good morning. It is my privilege this morning to introduce a hero of the conservative movement, South Carolina's Senator Jim DeMint. He was elected to the House of Representatives in 1998 and then to the Senate in 2004. He has earned national acclaim for his work to end the system of federal earmarks and to enact common sense immigration reform. Not only is the senator a leader for conservative values, but he's also a movement builder. In 2010, Senator DeMint endorsed and supported conservative challengers in primaries across this country. And thanks in no small part to Senator DeMint's courage and leadership, we now have Pat Toomey, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Ron Johnson, and Marco Rubio in the U.S. Senate. And the grassroots have taken notice. I work for Morton Blackwell's Leadership Institute, and we train thousands of activists across this country. We circulate a questionnaire at these trainings, and we ask the conservative activists to rate a dozen leaders and elected officials. 3 people receive overwhelmingly positive remarks from conservative grassroots. These 3 are Ronald Reagan, Milton Friedman, and Senator Jim DeMint. Please join me in welcoming South Carolina's Senator Jim DeMint.
Wow. What a great welcome. Thank you. Thank you and good morning. Welcome to a great event. You know, we've had a lot of bad news this week. On my way over, I was reading another story about a distant place where thugs had put 400,000 children out in the streets. Then I realized that was a story about the Chicago teachers' strike. Yep. But we've got to think of good things. You know, we've got to think good things could happen. I've even been trying to think of what would be good about President Obama being reelected. Now, I had to work on it a long time, but I finally came up with something. You know, if he's elected to a second term, he can no longer blame the previous administration for all his problems. Well, it's great to be with you. Really, I come out because this is the aroma of freedom, just to have all of you in town. Now, I know Harry Reid would say you're smelly, but for me, it is the aroma of freedom. When people of faith and values from all over the country come together, encourage each other, and encourage those of us who are serving here. Because I know you didn't come to hear what I had to say today, but I do know I came to be recharged by the people who are making things happen all over the country. You know, we're together today. We come together around those values that we know give life meaning and have made our country successful. A lot of them are biblical values: love, joy, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. And those values, when translated into how we live our lives, create individuals with strong work ethic and personal responsibility. It creates people who are willing to sacrifice, who support marriage and family. These people don't need laws to make them do the right thing. That's how we can be free as a nation. When folks share those values out across the country, we don't need a police state to make us do the right thing. And thank you. We don't need the federal government to force us or anyone else to carry out those values. But what we do need is a federal government that doesn't create laws and court rulings that keep us from practicing those values in our lives. Because freedom really is when millions of people can live and do and act the way that represents their values, the things that they value. Not my values or your values, but theirs. That's freedom. And we as values voters need to feel free to say we want folks to be free to do that. But we want to make sure that our laws do not keep us from living, practicing our faith, raising our children the way we want, and we want to make sure that the policies of this country allow us to do that. And that's why things like school choice are important. That I don't want to use our education system to force my values on other people. But I want to make sure that if we're creating public funds for education, that they include those who want to put their children in schools where there's a worldview that represents our values and our faith, and it will raise kids in a way where they can be responsible citizens. That's not too much to ask. And it's not too much to ask that we, as people of faith and values, have the right, the freedom of speech, to say that things are right and wrong, to believe that. We're willing to let others who disagree with us say that other things are right and wrong. But it's unacceptable in our country when a founder of a major business in our country has an interview and expresses support for family values in traditional marriage, and the political class begins to threaten the use of government force to hurt their company. That is unacceptable in America. But fortunately, we all have the freedom to eat more chicken. It's important we understand our adversaries because many of them are well-meaning. They just have a different view of the role of government. The two polar opposite views now that we're dealing with in Washington, one is represented by those who see government as a central player in our economy and our culture. So when those of us who say we cannot continue to spend money we don't have and put debt on our children, they don't understand that because they see cutting spending and limiting government as limiting our economy and the growth of our country. They don't understand how free markets work. They don't understand how prosperity is created. And they honestly believe that we have to continue to grow government at all costs in order to create prosperity in America. What they don't understand is that the moral issue of our time, or one of the greatest moral issues of our time, is the fact that we've got politicians here in Washington to ingratiate themselves to their voters, continue to spend money and do things for one group after another in order to look good back home, and pushing the debt for that onto our children and grandchildren for generations to come. That is a moral issue. It's a value issue. And we have got to stop it. And the only way we can, folks, is we can't compromise with these people who believe the government is that central player. We have to beat them at election time. Right. But these are the people who also believe the government should set our values. And again, we don't need to be a group of people who say we want the government to represent our values. We just cannot have, particularly the federal government, redefining marriage or telling us what is right or wrong. And if we help America understand that, folks, we're not trying to get the government to do it our way or your way. What we're asking for is the freedom to allow people to live out their faith and values in their lives the way they want. And we believe that our side will win. Because I'm convinced that most Americans want to have decent, moral lives and share our same values. But if the government continues to press in the wrong direction, it begins to change our culture and push it in the wrong direction. And that's what we're trying to stop here in America. I know we can win this battle, and the reason I do, and you've seen it as well, for years the political class, the Washington establishment picked our candidates, decided who was going to be elected, and stocked the House and the Senate with the folks who carried out their bidding. But in the last few years, that's really changed. Americans of all political stripes have said enough's enough. They've taken to the streets. And folks, I appreciate the introduction and some credit for helping to elect some great new patriots to the Senate, but it wasn't me. It was the people who decided that things had to change. And Washington picked one candidate in Pennsylvania. The people of Pennsylvania and all across America picked back to me. And we saw the same thing happen in Florida with Marco Rubio and in Kentucky with Rand Paul. And I know every time I mention their names, I don't have to give a good speech. If I just mention the names of the folks because people all of a sudden realize that the power to change our country is in our hands. And if we come to meetings like this, encourage each other, create that critical mass of energy, remind each other we're not alone, that all across the country people feel the same way we do, and that if we put a little work into it, we can begin to change Washington by changing the people we send to Washington. And we see people, a lot of folks ask me, said, Jim, is a Tea Party dead when we started this cycle? And I said, no, it's not. It's just better organized and more committed than it was before. And unfortunately for Senator Dick Lugar, who's a fine man, he found out the movement was still alive in Indiana. And in Texas, where the whole establishment, Republican establishment, had picked someone to come to Washington and do their bidding, the people of Texas and all across America picked a guy who was 2% in the polls 6 months before the primary. Ted Cruz is going to be our next senator. And so obviously I'm getting more and more excited because there's more than one person for them to target here in the Senate now. I've got folks who get up earlier than I do, go to work, get on TV quicker than I do, and so it's a lot better existence for those. And I think we'll have Jeff Flake, we'll have a number of other people who are coming to help us. But the thing I want to leave with you today is it's not because those of us in Washington are choosing to change things. It's because the people of this country have realized this country doesn't belong to our government or to politicians. You don't work for politicians. We are supposed to work for you and to reflect the values that you have. And when you come together and express strength and your voices are loud, it encourages those of us who are here on the front lines, who are always hearing, to go the other way when we're in Washington. So it's important for us, when I hear that I'm crazy and doing the wrong thing here in Washington, when I can come to this meeting and I can go to meetings like this all across the country and the people say, keep up the fight, we've got your back. That's all I need. That's all Mike Lee needs and Rand Paul, because we get our energy from you and it reminds us who we're fighting for and who we really work for. So I appreciate you all being here today. One last thing. I'm convinced there will be an American comeback, and it's already started. It's not going to be in Washington. What we see is states beginning to take back this concept of federalism. When you have 26 states file suit against the federal government for Obamacare, they're pushing back in the right direction. When states try to root out the fraud in their elections and they're having to fight the federal government to do it, or to have immigration laws that are sensible, that enforce legal immigration and enforce our laws, and they have to fight the federal government to do it. But they're doing it, and it shows us that we have the opportunity to rebuild our country from the ground up. As states and communities, as churches, as families, they form those little platoons of freedom. And that's what makes us great as a country. It's not one big, massive federal government. It's millions of people making their own decisions about what they want to do and what they value. That's what freedom is. And we are doing it as a nation now, regardless of how this election comes out. Obviously, I hope it comes out with President Romney in the White House, a Senate majority for Republicans. But regardless, whether we don't leave the work to them, what we're asking them to do is to move things out of Washington. Let states and communities deal with education. Let states develop their own energy resources. Let them develop their own transportation plans. We don't have to ask the federal government for much, except to get out of the way, let freedom work in America. Thank you for being part of that movement. Thank you for being here today. Thank you, folks.